The communication system on the human fleet was quiet, too quiet. The vast empty stretch of space between the stars was always filled with a low hum of activity. But now there was only silence. The crew on the flagship Titan's Might had grown used to the com, too used to it. Everyone knew the peace wouldn't last forever. In deep space, danger was always lurking, waiting to break the silence. Captain Arya Kane stood in front of the main communications console, watching the screen flicker. She had been staring at the same static for over an hour. Her hand hovered over the send button to call in a routine check with Earth Command. But something stopped her. The screen blinked, then flashed a bright red warning. Incoming transmission. Arya's heart skipped a beat. It was unusual to get an unexpected transmission so far from any known colonies or enemy territories. She quickly gestured for her team to listen in. Lieutenant Colton, the ship's communications officer, began typing rapidly on his console. "Are you seeing this, Captain?" Colton asked, his voice tight with confusion. Arya leaned in closer. "What is it?" "It's coming from the system. It's an SOS. An SOS." Arya's brow furrowed. "From whom?" The message on the screen crackled with static. It was barely understandable, but enough to send a chill down Arya's spine. "Urgent, under attack. Please, human, help." The words barely made sense, but they were clear enough. Someone was in trouble. Desperately in trouble. And they were asking for help from humanity, of all species. "What's the location?" Arya asked, her voice now stern. She knew this could be a trap. Sending a fleet to unknown territory was risky, but the desperation in the message, it was unmistakable. "Valorum system, Captain." "That's deep in Deathworlders space," Lieutenant Colton responded, his fingers hesitating on the keyboard. The name sent a shiver down his spine. Deathworlders, the most terrifying and brutal species humanity had encountered. They ruled there, planets with iron fists, and their worlds were known for being almost impossible to survive in. The fact that someone from this dangerous region was reaching out for help sent a warning, signal to every officer on the Titan's Might. This was no ordinary distress call. "Get me a detailed report on the Valorum system," Arya ordered sharply. Right now. The ship's sensors hummed as the crew began analyzing every bit of data on the Valorum system. The reports weren't good. The system was surrounded by hostile forces, and the planet where the signal had originated was on the edge of total destruction. A once thriving world was now in chaos, attacked by an unknown enemy. But what caught Arya's attention was the name in the report, Draitha, the Deathworlder Empire. They were known for their cruelty, and their presence near the signal was no coincidence. This wasn't just an attack, was an invasion, and the fact that the Valorum system's inhabitants had reached out to humans for help was a sign that they were either desperate or out of options. "Captain, I'm reading something strange in the transmission," Colton said, his voice rising with concern. "It's a faint signal mixed in with the SOS. It looks like coordinates, coordinates," Arya repeated, narrowing her eyes. "Where?" "They're pointing to a sector just outside the Valorum system. It could be a safe zone, or it could be a trap," Arya finished for him. She stood up straighter, her mind racing with possibilities. There was no way to know if this was a genuine plea for help or a setup by the Deathworlders to lure them into a deadly trap. But one thing was clear, this wasn't just some random distress signal. Someone out there needed help, and humanity was the only one capable of answering that call. "Captain, what should we do?" Lieutenant Colton asked, glancing at her, waiting for orders. He wasn't the only one on the bridge who was uneasy. The crew was tense. They had all heard the stories about the Deathworlder stories of planets burned to ashes and civilizations wiped out without mercy. Arya knew that if they didn't respond, there could be no turning back. They couldn't just ignore an SOS, especially from such a dangerous region. But the stakes were high and the risks were enormous. One wrong move and humanity's fleet could be walking straight into an ambush. "Send a fleet-wide alert," Arya said, her voice cold and decisive. "Prepare the ships for a deep space operation. We're going in." "Are we really doing this, Captain?" Colton asked, his voice trembling slightly. The fear in his tone was hard to ignore, but Arya couldn't afford hesitation now. They were soldiers, trained to face the impossible. "Yes," she said, her tone unwavering. "We're going to the Valorum system, and we're going to find out who is sending that message. If it's a trap, we'll be ready." As the orders were given and the crew scrambled to prepare, Arya couldn't shake the uneasy feeling gnawing at her. A desperate SOS was rare in the galaxy, and for it to come from such a dangerous place, it didn't sit right with her. The question that lingered in her mind was simple. Why would the Deathworlders, or anyone, send an SOS to humans? The fleet powered up, and the stars outside the viewport began to blur as the ship moved into hyperspace. No one on the bridge spoke. They all knew this mission would change everything. Whatever awaited them at the edge of the Valorum system, it was something they were not prepared for. The transmission continued to play, over and over again, until it finally cut off. The last words were clearer now. "Help us, or we will perish." The crew held their breath. In the vast silence of space, there was only one truth left to face. They were heading straight into the unknown. The silence of space felt suffocating as the Titan's might and its fleet traveled further into the unknown. The ship was fully prepared for combat, its engines roaring to life with every jump through hyperspace. But even with all their advanced technology and weaponry, Captain Arya Kane couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. The crew was tense, their eyes glued to the consoles as they monitored every movement, every flicker of energy around them. The unknown stretched out before them, a vast sea of stars and danger. "Captain," Lieutenant Colton's voice broke through. "The stillness, we've hit the edge of the Valorum system. The coordinates from the SOS are coming into focus." Arya looked up from the star maps displayed in front of her. The map was dotted with countless warships from different factions, but it was the massive, looming presence of the Draketha fleet that stood out the most. The Deathworlders were known for their brutal, relentless nature. No one who had ever encountered them had lived to tell the tale. And now they were stationed near the very system that had sent out the SOS. "Lieutenant, give me the exact coordinates," Arya said, her tone sharp. "Plotting now, Captain," Colton replied, his fingers flying over his console. "It's a small moon orbiting a gas giant in the outer rim. There's minimal military presence, just a few scouting ships, but there's something strange about the readings. I'm getting uncharted energy signatures." "Uncharted energy," Arya repeated. "Could be a hidden base or some sort of weapon." The ship's tactical officer, Commander Sophia Price, spoke up from the side. "Or it could be a decoy. We need to be cautious, Captain. We're entering Draethor territory. Anything could be a trap." Arya nodded, the weight of the decision pressing on her shoulders. She had trained her whole life for moments like this, but there was no training that could prepare her for the unknown. A trap, a weapon, or a plea for help. Humanity was about to face something it had never dealt with before. Launch reconnaissance. Drones, Arya ordered. I want eyes on that moon, and I want the fleet ready for any kind of response. Minutes passed in tense silence as the drones sped towards their destination, feeding back live data to the fleet. The images that began to appear on the screen were both beautiful and unsettling. The moon was a barren wasteland, cracked and scarred by unknown forces. There were signs of battle-burnt-out craters, abandoned structures, and strange twisted metal that seemed out of place. But the most unsettling thing was the eerie glow coming from beneath the surface. "What is that?" Arya muttered to herself, narrowing her eyes at the strange energy readings. "It looks like an underground city," Commander Price said, her voice filled with disbelief. "It's shielded, Captain. Whatever's down there doesn't want to be found." The thought of an underground city, hidden from the outside world, immediately set off alarms in Arya's mind. Was this some sort of resistance group fighting against the Drakethar, or was it something else entirely? Before she could voice her thoughts, the entire fleet was rocked by a sudden surge of energy. The ship's shields flared in response, and the bridge lights flickered. The crew braced themselves, knowing that they had just entered a war zone. "Report," Arya barked. "It's coming from the moon's surface," Lieutenant Colton shouted. "A massive energy spike. There's something down there, Captain. Something powerful." Arya's heart raced. This was no ordinary SOS. The strange energy, the hidden city, the attack sit, all pointed to something far more dangerous than they had prepared for. "We need to get down there, now," she ordered. "Prepare the landing shuttles. We're going in." As the landing craft prepared for launch, Arya couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. She wasn't the only one with that thought. Throughout the fleet, crew members felt a growing sense of unease. The enemy was close. The Drakethar could be lying in wait, hidden among the shadows. And yet, there was the faintest glimmer of hope. Possibility that the SOS wasn't a trap, but a desperate plea from someone who had no other choice. As the shuttles descended into the dark atmosphere of the moon, the tension grew unbearable. The surface below was a maze of craters and wreckage, and as the craft touched down, the ground seemed to tremble beneath them. "Stay sharp, everyone," Arya said, her voice steady despite the rising anxiety. She was the captain, and her crew trusted her. They had to. The door of the shuttle opened with a hiss, and the crew stepped out into the cold alien landscape. The air was thick with dust, and the sky above was a deep red, casting an eerie glow over everything. In the distance, the faint outline of the underground city could be seen, a dark silhouette against the harsh landscape. "Captain," Commander Price said, her voice low, "I don't like this. We've never encountered anything like this before." Arya didn't respond immediately. She had a feeling deep in her gut that whatever was waiting for them on this barren moon would change the course of their entire mission and possibly humanity's future. There was no going back now. Suddenly, a distant sound echoed through the air, a low, rumbling noise that seemed to come from deep beneath the surface. It was followed by a flash of light on the horizon, and then silence. Did anyone else hear that? Colton asked, his voice barely a whisper. Everyone on the shuttle looked at one another, but no one spoke. The eerie calm had returned, but it was a calm that felt like the stillness before a storm. The crew began to move forward, but each step felt heavier than the last. Arya's mind raced as she wondered who or what was responsible for this SOS, and more importantly, why they had sent it to humanity. The moon's surface was unlike anything Captain Arya Kane had ever seen. Jagged rocks and deep craters filled the barren landscape, but there was something else in unsettling, almost unnatural stillness. The air was thick with dust and the scent of metal, and the red sky cast an ominous glow over everything. Every step the crew took felt like they were walking deeper into the heart of an unknown nightmare. The underground city wasn't far now. The coordinates led them straight to a massive, cracked structure that seemed to pulse with energy. It was hidden within the heart of the largest crater on the moon, barely visible under the ash and wreckage. There was something strange about the city, though. It wasn't just old, it was ancient. "Something doesn't feel right, Commander," Sophia Price muttered under her breath as the team approached the entrance. Her hand never left her weapon, and her eyes scanned every corner of the eerie landscape. It wasn't just the silence that unsettled her, it was the absence of life. The crew moved cautiously, weapons drawn, every sense on high alert. The communication systems were still down, the SOS message now a distant echo in their minds. The underground city was closer now, its dark outline looming ahead like a shadowy giant. As they reached the entrance, the crew could hear faint mechanical sounds emanating from deep within, as though the city itself was alive and waiting. "It's like the city is watching us," Lieutenant Colton whispered, his voice full of unease. His eyes darted from one dark corner to another, as if expecting something to leap out at them. Captain Kane didn't respond. She had learned long ago that fear was a distraction, but even she couldn't ignore the growing tension. She was about to walk into the heart of Deathworlder territory, a place where no human had ever set foot. The legends of the Deathworlders, brutal, savage, and merciless, flashed through her mind. These creatures thrived in the most hostile environments, their strength unmatched, their ruthlessness legendary, and now they were on the cusp of revealing themselves to humanity. "Ready, Captain," Commander Price said, her voice tight. "We've cleared the perimeter. No sign of movement so far." "Good," Arya replied, her voice calm but firm. "Stay close. We move in together." As the crew entered the darkened tunnels of the city, the temperature dropped noticeably. The walls were lined with strange markings, symbols that looked alien, yet there was something strangely familiar about them. They felt like a warning, a sign that they were trespassing on ancient ground. The further they went, the more the feeling of being watched intensified. Suddenly, a low hum echoed from the depths of the city. The walls vibrated, and the ground beneath their boots trembled. The crew stopped in their tracks, eyes wide. The hum grew louder, and then, without warning, the ground split open, revealing a massive cavern below. From the shadows of the cavern, a figure emerged. It was massive, its height almost impossible to comprehend. The creature was humanoid, but its body was covered in thick, armored plating that shimmered in the dim light. Its eyes glowed an eerie yellow, and its breath came out in deep, mechanical huffs. The air around it was thick with an unsettling energy, and as it moved toward the humans, the ground seemed to tremble beneath its feet. The Deathworlder was here, and it wasn't alone. Out of the darkness, more figures appeared, some larger, others smaller, but all just as terrifying. They moved with predatory grace, their muscles rippling beneath their armored skin. Each one of them radiated power and danger. These were not the primitive creatures humanity had heard about. These were something much more ancient, much more deadly. "Stay calm," Captain Arya said, her voice steady, but inside she could feel her heart racing. The Deathworlders were here. And they weren't just any threat, they were the Deathworlders. The massive leader of the group stepped forward. Towering over Arya, its voice, when it spoke, was deep and guttural, sending a chill through the entire crew. "You have come for our help," the voice reverberated through the cavern like thunder. "You who have no place in this world, you who are nothing more than children playing in the shadows of giants." Arya stood her ground, staring the creature down, refusing to let it intimidate her. "We received your SOS. We came to help." The creature's laughter echoed around the cavern, a sound that sent shivers down the spines of everyone present. "You think you came to help?" it growled, its voice dripping with scorn. "You know nothing of what you've walked into. This world is not for the faint of heart. You are fools." The air around them seemed to crackle with tension. Arya's mind raced as the creature circled. The humans, was this a trap? Were they going to be slaughtered right here, right now? But then, the creature stopped and tilted its head, as if studying her. Its yellow eyes burned into hers, and for a moment, there was a strange stillness. "There is more at stake than you realize." "Human," the Deathworlder said, its tone shifting. "You were not here by accident. You were chosen. The question is, are you ready to face the truth of your existence?" Before Arya could respond, the ground shook again, louder this time, and a distant explosion rattled the cavern. The sound of battle, the roar of unseen forces began to fill the air. Something was coming. Something far worse than the Deathworlders. Creature gave a deep, guttural laugh. "You have no idea what you've awakened." And just like that, the first real battle began. The battle began with an explosion that rocked the cavern, sending dust and debris scattering through the air. The Deathworlder creatures moved with terrifying speed, their massive forms cutting through the darkness like shadows of doom. The sound of their footsteps heavy, relentless rumbled through the ground, signaling that this was no mere skirmish. Captain Arya Kane's mind raced as she signaled her crew to take cover. "Defensive positions now," she ordered, her voice unwavering. The crew quickly scattered, finding any form of shelter that could behind rocks, damaged machinery, and even the cavern walls themselves. Weapons were raised, eyes scanning the darkness, waiting for the next move. Then the roar came. A wave of Deathworlders surged forward, their eyes glowing with fury. Their movements were like a symphony of destruction, each one performing its own deadly dance, every step bringing them closer to the humans. Their armor shimmered in the dim light, like an army forged from nightmares. "Incoming," shouted Commander Price, as the first Deathworlder leaped at them with the speed of a predator, claws outstretched. The crew opened fire, but the bullets barely made a dent in its thick plating. It was as if the creatures were made from living steel. Arya's mind spun, processing every detail. They weren't just fighting for survival, they were fighting to understand what these Deathworlders wanted. And more importantly, what had caused them to send the SOS in the first place. Another explosion shook the ground, sending a massive cloud of dust into the air. A second, even larger, Deathworlder appeared from the shadows, its massive frame blotting out the light. With a deafening growl, it charged straight for Arya's position. She barely had time to react, ducking just as its massive fist collided with the ground, creating a shockwave that knocked the humans off their feet. "Fall back," Arya shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. "We need to regroup." The humans scrambled to move, but the Deathworlders were relentless. They were faster, stronger, and more brutal than anything humanity had ever faced. But It wasn't just their physical power that made them terrifying. It was the way they fought. Every movement was calculated, every strike precise. They were not simply creatures of rage. They were warriors, born from the harshest worlds, shaped by centuries of warfare. Arya gritted her teeth as she took cover behind a fallen piece of debris. Her heart pounded in her chest. There was no way they could hold their ground like this. The enemy was too powerful, too numerous. But she couldn't afford to give up. Not now. Lieutenant Colton, can you get a signal through to the fleet? Arya shouted, struggling to stay calm under the pressure. She needed backup. Fast. I'm trying. Captain, Colton yelled back. But the interference from the planet's core is too strong. We're completely cut off. A chill ran down Arya's spine. They were isolated, cut off from their only hope of rescue. If they didn't get out soon, there would be no escape. But just as the thought of retreat crossed her mind, a new sound echoed through the cavern, a low, rumbling growl, much deeper than anything they had heard before. What is that? Price whispered, her face pale. From the shadows, a massive, sleek creature emerged, this one unlike any Deathworlder they had seen. It stood on two legs, towering over the rest, with black scales that seemed to absorb the light. Its eyes glowed, bright blue, cutting through the darkness like burning ice. The creature's mouth opened in a wide, terrifying grin, showing rows of razor-sharp teeth, but it wasn't the size or the appearance that made it stand out. It was the aura of power that surrounded it. This creature was different. It was the leader, the one who had been speaking to them earlier. You thought you could just come here, didn't you? The creature's voice echoed through the cavern, shaking the very air around them. It wasn't just a voice, it was a command. You don't understand what you've walked into. The humans were trapped, outnumbered. The Deathworlders, who had already proven their lethal strength, now seemed to have an even darker power at their disposal. The ground trembled again, and the air seemed to pulse with an electric charge. The creature's presence was overwhelming. Arya knew that if they didn't figure out what this creature wanted, what the true purpose of the SOS was, they would be wiped out in an instant. The creature slowly approached, its massive form casting a long shadow over Arya. You think you can fight me? You are nothing but ants beneath my feet. Its eyes burned with a cold fire. But you've been chosen for a reason. I want to see if you're worthy of the truth. What truth? Arya demanded, standing tall despite the crushing pressure around her. Her team was exhausted, their weapons running low on ammunition, and they had no backup. But she would not back down. The creature's laughter echoed through the cavern. It was not a sound of joy, it was the cold, mocking laugh of a predator who had already decided its prey's fate. You came here for an answer, but the answer is not one you're ready to hear. Suddenly, there was a sharp, blinding flash of light from deep within the city. A series of energy pulses erupted, followed by an unnatural roar, like the entire planet was waking up. The Deathworlders scattered, retreating into the shadows. Even the massive creature seemed to hesitate, its gaze fixed on the city's heart. We're not alone, the creature growled. Something worse than you could ever imagine is coming, and you've just unleashed it. Before Arya could ask another question, the ground beneath them began to crack open, revealing a glowing fissure deep beneath the surface. Something large, something ancient, was stirring below. Whatever had been hidden for centuries was now awake, and the battle for survival had just escalated into something far more dangerous. The ground beneath Captain Arya Kane's boots trembled violently as the ancient fissure cracked wider. The air was charged with an unnatural energy, swirling around them like an invisible storm. The glow from the deep chasm intensified, pulsing, in rhythm with the distant, deafening roar that now filled the cavern. The Deathworlder leader, still towering over Arya and her team, stepped back, his eyes wide with something between fear and awe. "It's too late," the creature growled, its voice now tinged with panic. "You should have never come here." "What is it?" Arya demanded, her heart racing as the ground continued to shake, threatening to swallow them whole. "What have we unleashed?" The Deathworlder's expression darkened, and for the first time there was hesitation in his movements. Something ancient, something that was never meant to awaken. "And now you've done it." A deep, rumbling sound echoed from the depths of the planet as the fissure widened further, revealing a dark, swirling mass beneath the surface. It was alive, undulating with a sinister energy, like an ancient beast stirring from its long slumber. The smell of decay and power filled the air, and it wasn't long before the humans realized what they were dealing with. A force older than any civilization in the galaxy, more powerful than any Deathworlder or human. The creature, once towering in its confidence, seemed to retreat, its body rigid with terror. "The abyssal wraith," it whispered, the words barely audible over the roaring chaos. "An entity older than time itself. We, the Deathworlders, thought we could control it, but it cannot be controlled." Arya's mind spun. A force like the San ancient, monstrous being, bound beneath the planet for eons, was beyond anything humanity had prepared for, and they had awoken it. There was no going back now, but what could they do? They were trapped in the heart of the city with no way of escaping the creature below, no way of calling for backup, and no clear path to survival. "Is it is it alive?" Lieutenant Colton whispered, his voice full of dread. "It's more than alive," Arya replied, her gaze fixed on the swirling energy beneath them. "It's hunger. It feeds on fear, on power, on destruction." And then the ground cracked open completely. From the depths of the chasm, a massive, tendril-like appendage shot up, reaching for the sky with terrifying speed. It was like the planet itself was convulsing, as if it was alive and in agony. The appendage lashed out, smashing into the walls of the city with the force of 1,000 storms. Buildings collapsed in on themselves, and the ground buckled beneath the impact. The abyssal wraith was rising. The Deathworlders, once fierce and unstoppable, scattered in terror. Even the leader, the one who had mocked Arya and her crew, seemed to realize that there was no surviving this. The city began to collapse around them, and the very air seemed to warp with the immense power of the being rising from the abyss. "We're not leaving," Arya said, her voice cutting through the panic around her. "We can't leave. This is what we came for. We have to stop it." "What?" Commander Price stared at her, disbelief written on her face. "You're crazy. This thing. It'll destroy us all." "I know," Arya replied, her face hardening with resolve. "But we can't let it destroy anyone else. Not if there's a chance. We have to fight." The Deathworlder leader, trembling with fear, approached Arya, his eyes wide with desperation. "You think you can fight it? We tried, and failed. The abyssal wraith doesn't die. It consumes." The ground shook again, and the creature's massive tendrils crashed through the surface, snapping like chains of destruction. The Deathworlder's words seemed to fade into nothing as Arya's focus narrowed. "Colton, get the fleet to orbit now," Arya said, her voice hard with command. "Prepare a full bombardment, but only on my order. You can't be serious, Colton protested, but he knew better than to argue when Arya gave orders like that. He immediately started working on the communications, though every moment felt like an eternity. The creature was nearly free now, and with every passing second, its power grew stronger. It was the size of a mountain, its form twisting and thrashing. As it clawed its way to the surface, its many eyes glowing with a hunger that seemed to pierce through time itself. A shriek echoed from the chasm as the abyssal wraith finally broke free, its massive form rising above them, towering with a presence that could only be described as endless darkness. "We're going to need everything we've got," Arya muttered. Under her breath, the Deathworlder leader, seeing the terrifying reality of the creature before them, turned and fled, his soldiers scattering in all directions, leaving the humans to face the monster alone. "On my signal," Arya shouted. The entire crew stood their ground, eyes wide in terror but filled with resolve. This was their moment to fight not for survival, but for something far more important. This was their last stand, their chance to show the galaxy what humanity was made of. The fleet in orbit began to charge up its weapons, preparing to launch everything they had at the abyssal wraith. The seconds stretched out in agonizing silence, and Arya's hand hovered over the activation button, but just as she was about to give the order, the ground beneath them began to shake violently, throwing everyone off balance. The creature's massive, glowing eyes locked onto Arya. In that moment, she realized that this was more than just a battle. It was a reckoning. The battle for survival had turned into a war for the very future of humanity. As Arya gave the command to fire, a blinding light erupted from the heart of the creature, and the battle began in full force. The abyssal wraith was not going down without a fight, and neither would humanity.